near assembly of people, below an altitude of 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a horizontal radius of 2,000 feet of the aircraft.
And what would the minimum altitude in uncongested areas be?
No lower than 500 feet above the surface, except over open water or sparsely populated areas. In those areas, I can't operate my aircraft any closer than 500 feet to any person, vessel, vehicle, or structure. At all times, I need to be high enough so I can make a safe landing if there's an emergency.
Okay, as we approach our destination airport today, who will you contact and on what frequencies?
Since I'll be in Class C and D airspace today, I'll get the approach control frequency for Abilene Class C airspace, as well as the tower frequency for Abilene Regional. I'll also need the ATIS frequency, as well as the ground control frequency. As the chart indicates, ATIS will be 118.25, approach will be 125.0, and the tower will be 120.1, and ground will be on 121.7.
So let's suppose the radio fails in flight. Would it be possible to continue on to Abilene with no communication capability?
I can't enter Class C airspace without communication capability. If my destination was in Class D airspace only, I could proceed inbound and land as long as the weather is at or above basic VFR minimums. So I establish and maintain contact with the tower and receive a clearance to land via light gun signals.
Now, give me an idea of what procedures you would use to enter the traffic pattern and land at Abilene in a no radio condition.
Well, first I'd like to say that it'd be a great idea to land at a non-towered airport and try to determine the problem. If I decided to proceed, I would phone ahead and notify the controlling facility of my intentions. Then I would proceed inbound, remaining outside or above the Class D airspace, until I could determine the direction and flow of traffic if I didn't already know. Then I would join the airport traffic pattern, maintain visual contact with the tower, and look for light gun signals. I'd squawk 7600 on my transponder so ATC is fully aware of my situation.
Speaking of light gun signals, what would you do if you saw an alternating red and green light while inbound for landing?
I would exercise extreme caution, but go ahead and land unless I saw reason to do otherwise.
Now, let's suppose you're heading downwind and the tower gives you a steady red light followed a minute later by a flashing green. What should you do?
If I get a steady red signal, I want to move clear of all other traffic and circle around until I got further signal. The flashing green would then indicate I could return for a landing, hopefully followed by a steady green, meaning cleared to land.
And how are you going to acknowledge the signals from the light gun?
By rocking my wings. At night, I would acknowledge my blinking by landing light or navigation lights.
Now, is there a standard traffic pattern at a non-towered airport?
Yes, I would enter the pattern in level flight, being the midpoint of the runway at pattern altitude. I should make all turns to the left unless the airport displays visual markings or light signals that indicate right turns. When departing, I should comply with any established traffic pattern for that airport I may have found in the AFD. During my climb, I would continue straight out or exit with a 45-degree turn to the left in a left-hand pattern or to the right in a right-hand pattern after reaching pattern altitude. I'd announce my position on the CTAF so others in the area know my whereabouts and intentions.
How are you going to determine the traffic pattern, an active runway, and the wind conditions at a non-towered airport?
I would try to contact Unicom first or listen to others on CTAF, but if that's not giving me the information I'm looking for, I would look for a windsock and hopefully a segmented circle.
What traffic pattern altitude should you fly at a non-towered airport?
During pre-flight planning, I should reference the AFD to determine the correct pattern altitude. Short of doing that, I could make a radio call before entering the pattern for a possible field advisory from Unicom. If that wasn't available, then I'd use the standard pattern altitude of 1,000 feet AGL.
So, Robin, you're approaching a non-towered airport, and you notice a big yellow X on the runway. What does that indicate?
The runway has been permanently closed.
Suppose we're on final for Abilene. Explain to me what some of the runway markings indicate. Let's use this diagram of a typical runway.
Okay, of course we have the runway designation, which indicates runway direction relative to magnetic north. We also have a series of chevrons indicating this section of the runway is unusable for landing, takeoff, or taxiing. There's also a series of 8 white stripes arranged on both sides of the runway centerline, which indicates the runway threshold, the beginning of the usable landing runway.
Now, what is the significance of a displaced threshold, and how are they marked?
A displaced threshold is shown by arrows painted on the pavement that lead up to the runway threshold. Basically, this surface can't be used for landing because it doesn't have load-bearing capacity. It can be used for taxi or takeoff, though.
Let's say you're going down the taxiway and you come up to a red sign with white letters on it. What does that signify?
That would be a mandatory sign, which you would generally find marking an area where you either shouldn't go or perhaps need a clearance to enter. For instance, runway numbers will be displayed on the mandatory sign that appears next to the runway hold short line.
Now, what are the 2 white rectangles on either side of the runway center line?
Those are runway aiming point markings. They're located 1,000 feet from the landing threshold and serve as a visual aiming point for landing.
Okay, we're still on a long final, and we have to get the following clearance from tower. Cessna 4816 Bravo. You're cleared to land runway 6 right. Hold short taxiway Bravo. Explain the significance of this clearance.
This is a land and hold short clearance. At towered airports, ATC might clear me to land and hold short of an intersecting runway, taxiway, or some other point on a runway. If I accept the clearance, I'm assuring the controller that I can land the aircraft safely and stop within the available landing distance.
Must you accept the clearance?
No. If I'm not familiar with the land and hold short operation, I shouldn't accept it. Matter of fact, the controller will expect me to decline the clearance if I feel it will compromise safety.
Okay, we're on the ground now. How are the taxiways marked?
Taxiways are designated by a single continuous yellow line.
Give me some examples of the airport signs you'll be seeing while you taxi to parking.
I can think of runway distance remaining signs, information signs, direction and destination signs.
Now, let's talk about runway incursions. What are several recommended practices concerning prevention of runway incursions?
Well, I should always read back all runway crossing and hold short instructions. I can make sure I review airport layouts during my pre-flight planning and before descending to land. Also, I shouldn't hesitate to request progressive taxi instructions when I'm unsure of the clearance given or where I'm going. In lower visibilities, I should keep my aircraft lights on. While taxiing, I should have the airport layout diagram on my kneeboard.
You are correct, and I might add that during pre-flight you should make sure to review any NOTAMs for information on runway and taxiway closures at your intended airport destinations. Also, it's another good practice to always write down any complex taxiway instructions at unfamiliar airports.
That's a good idea.
Now, on arrival into Abilene, you'll notice you're being vectored to a final behind a relatively large aircraft. What precautions should you take?
I need to be concerned with wake turbulence, especially since I'm following an aircraft that's likely heavy, clean, and slow. If I'll be landing on the same runway, I'll stay at or above the larger aircraft's final approach flight path and make note of its touchdown point and land beyond it.
How about if you were cleared to take off behind a departing large aircraft? What procedure would you use in this case?
I would make note of the larger aircraft's rotation point and rotate prior to where it rotated. Then I would continue climbing above the larger aircraft's climb path until turning clear.
If tower clears you to take off behind a large aircraft, who's responsible for wake turbulence separation? You or the tower?
I am.
That's exactly correct. Accepting a clearance from ATC is an acknowledgement that you're going to ensure a safe takeoff and landing interval and for you to accept the responsibility for providing wake turbulence separation.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of turbulence, where are you going to encounter wind shear?
Wind shear can occur at any level in the atmosphere, but most often in areas such as frontal zones, thunderstorms, and in low-level temperature inversions.
What's the significance of wind shear to you as a pilot?
If I encounter a significant wind shear, it can easily go beyond my capability as a pilot, as well as the aircraft's capability to recover from it. It's particularly hazardous down at low altitudes on approach and departure from an airport.
Robin, that's exactly right. Take any report of wind shear very, very seriously. It's been the cause of many accidents, so it's definitely an operational concern for everyone. Okay, before we go fly, a couple of things I'd like to cover. Number one is you're going to be acting as pilot in command. The regulations say even though you don't have a private pilot certificate yet, you're the PIC of the aircraft during the check ride. Do whatever you think is necessary to keep us safe and legal. Also, if the need arises for transfer of control of the airplane from you to me or vice versa, we'll say your airplane, followed by I have the airplane method of transfer. Okay, Robin, just one more thing. If we do have an actual emergency on the check ride, you will have the airplane and you will handle the emergency. If it becomes necessary for me to take the airplane, I'll announce that I have the airplane. The check ride is over at that point, and all we're concerned about is handling the emergency at hand. So far, you're doing great. Robin, let's go fly.
By demonstrating her operational understanding as a private pilot, Robin has instilled confidence in the examiner of her ability to pass the check ride. Again, it's important to remember that this part of the check ride is a test of your practical application of the knowledge you gained in your training. This is not a rehash of the rote-like questions you already answered during your FAA knowledge exam. From the briefing room, the examiner will join Robin on the tarmac and watch as she goes through a pre-flight inspection. There will likely be additional questions here. Once in the airplane, Robin will run through the maneuvers she's demonstrated numerous times to her instructor according to the tolerances outlined in the PTS. She'll make a point to talk through everything she does, so the examiner doesn't have the opportunity to question her motives or actions. This is particularly important in the case of the special emphasis items. While Robin will most likely start out in the direction of Abilene, flying the planned cross-country, the examiner will probably ask her to divert at some point to remain in the general practice area in order to demonstrate the required maneuvers. Upon return, the examiner will then issue Robin her temporary pilot certificate back in the briefing room, following his observations from the check ride. The permanent license will follow in the mail a couple of weeks following the check ride, but in the meantime, that temporary certificate will do the trick for granting Robin all the privileges of a licensed private pilot. I'm Matt Dragon for ASA, wishing you the best of luck with your check ride.